Hello everyone, I'm your host Noopur back with Innovation Roots Studio, and today I'm really honored to have Sandhya Vasudevan with us in this discussion. She's a senior advisor and business management consultant. She's been managing director ex-Deutsche Bank, and I'm really excited to have a discussion with Hi Sandhya.
Hi, Noopur. It's an honor to be here with you.
Same here. I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you, Sandhya. And my first question goes to you because there are a lot of people who would like to know about you. So, for the uninitiated, who is Sandhya Vasudevan as a person?
Uh, I'm a financial services and technology professional. I've been a managing director for over 20 years, the last of which was with Deutsche Bank. I played many roles through my career, and now I'm a board advisor, a business management consultant. I tend to cover offshoring, shared services, also a strong focus on risk control, regulatory governance. Um, Based on my business experience, a lot of strategy, innovation, as well as ideation for businesses. If you want to know more about me, you can obviously look at the LinkedIn profile as well as my website.
Thank you, Sandhya, for sharing this bit about you. And Nana, I'm really interested to know about this, Sandhya. How was your journey to become a managing director at Deutsche Bank Group? What was the experience you had? Please share with us.
Thank you, Noopur. I've had a fairly long career. I started off in the TVS Group, managing their in-house finance companies. As part of that, there were lots of different activities: general management, hardcore financial management, starting a brokerage house for sales and trading of shares. But a lot of my time, almost 6 years of it, went into business process transformation and digitalization in those days. It was really early days of digitalizing, but the fundamentals I realized hasn't changed very much. I then moved to Guardian Royal Exchange, which got acquired by AXA. This was an insurance group and early days of offshoring. You looked at how do you get work into India in partnership with uh, people like McKinsey, PwC, and others. But more importantly, what we also realized was if the group bought and sold a company or we merged with someone else, it has a massive impact for the teams on the ground in India. And that was a massive learning. In fact, when Guardian Royal Exchange got merged with AXA, I had to go to board 6 times. In that 1 year, I had 9 bosses. So you need to know how to be resilient. And I think the other thing that happened during that time was I was actively involved with the insurance strategy. This is before the sector itself opened up. So I like being in places where things are changing, so which means you get opportunities to do new things. Post AXA, I moved on to Thomson Reuters. I grew the team from 200 to 9,000 when I left. Lots of different activities during that time. We were tasked with contributing about 6% to the gross margins, so which means driving operational effectiveness. And as you're growing, you want to make sure you have systems, processes in order to do that. So ISO, CMM, any other methodology that would help us was very much part of the way we worked. During this time, I also had the responsibility for sales in India. It gives you a different perspective. When you're doing offshoring is large team management, you are working very closely with the global team, but sales, especially when the volumes are very small and the price points are very different from a lot of the local players, you have a very different task at hand. I then moved to Deutsche Bank. I'd been talking to Deutsche Bank for almost 5 years before I joined them in 2010. And I stayed with Deutsche for 11 years. Amazing journey. I joined as the head of the offshore entity. I was also the global head of business engineering. Real good fun. But I think I also enjoyed my stint with the bank, where you had oversight of the 12 legal entities. I was also the chief risk officer for a short period of time there before I took on my current assignment, which is the Divisional Control and Regulatory Officer, both globally and in APAC, driving a number of initiatives. It's been a rich and rewarding experience, so next journey awaits me.
That's really amazing to know about the kind of roles you have played in different organizations. And my next question is around the same, because you have played different roles in different organizations, and which contains a lot of responsibility and ownership. So what are the biggest challenge you have faced, Sandhya, as a professional, and how did you address it?
Um, I think when you take on any new area of responsibility, you need to kind of understand what the purpose of that particular responsibility is, organizational purpose, the mission, the goals, the expectations there. You then need to calibrate where you stand. Uh, what are the capabilities you bring to the table? What are the new things that you need to learn? And what are the kind of people that you need to add to your team in order to achieve those goals? And typically, I've found that when one wants to deliver something, there are three main buckets that I have looked at while addressing any of it. So, for example, under strategy, you need to have a very clear understanding of what the end customer really wants. How do they make money by using your products, or how do they derive value by using your products? That will then give you ideas around what kind of innovation and practices you need to put in place. You also need to understand very clearly the commercial business aspect, which you have to drive. How do you get your profit as you drive this agenda? The next piece you need to be very clear about is how do you deliver results? If you're executing, do you need to work across different functions? Do you need to work across geographies? What kind of dynamics are there when you're working with these different groups? Because if you don't understand your stakeholders, you cannot execute effectively. You need to have clarity of purpose, which is what your strategy gives you, but your execution is hands-on, very, very clear outcome driven, but very strongly aligning the people with you. Which then leads me to the last bit, which is on capability. Of course, it stands on the fundamentals of your integrity, values, ethics. But more importantly, added to that is, have you attracted the right kind of people? Are you able to retain them in order to kind of drive that agenda? And do you have the right systems, processes, and tools to make that happen? So it doesn't matter which, I think before we started this session, we were talking about you had a vast experience. How has it been different over the years? Some of these fundamentals don't change. Do you understand what the requirement today is? Do you understand where you stand? How do you need to calibrate in order to achieve the future that you want to accomplish? Because it doesn't matter what you've done in the past. It is more important to be realistic about what you have today and where you want to go in the future. So the challenge is always trying to align that and seeing, are you adding value both to yourself and the organization that you're working with?
Certainly, Sandhya. And since you have played very significant role in the banking industry for many years, how is banking industry affected by the number of fintechs increasing according to your experiences?
It's a very good question. For me, the fintechs are kind of a subset of a larger environment of change in which the financial sector operates. And I'd say financial sector because it covers non-banking financial institutions, the banks, as well as the insurance sector. The financial sector is almost the backbone of all human activity. And there is a massive geopolitical implication around this. Countries, their GDP, what they bring to the table, all have a role that gets played out. So the dynamics of trade across different countries, the rules that each country will put in place, the effects of WTO or ESG on the environment is massive. So in the last couple of years, banks have been spending a lot of money on the ESG programs and driving it as mainstream business, not as a nice to do on the side activity. So if you then take that into every country has its own regulator. They have partnerships across the globe for common standards, but they also need to take care of the needs of the country. So the rules on certain topics may be the same, but the way it's applied in different countries tends to be slightly different based on the needs of that institution. So while this is happening, there's another massive disruption that's at play, which is technology. So the technology impact is incredible. I mean, within our lifetime, the last 10 years, the kind of changes that all of us have seen has been incredible. So the fintechs are playing in that. So on one level, technology has no barriers of time, space, countries, rules, or anything. But you have those other barriers with which we need to deal with. And India has been actually a path breaker in many ways. We put in place the India Stack, which had the Jandan accounts for everybody. We had the Aadhaar card, which I think in the early days, no country thought we'd be able to pull this off or use it in such an effective way. And then we have started using the mobile device as the way to connect all of this. And with that as the base, every person in India has been able to take advantage of the money which the government can give it. And people in the past 10, 15 years ago, very small number of people were involved in the financial sector. Today, almost everyone is part of the financial sector because they can get credit. And the fintechs have played an incredible role in tapping that. The unplanned sector, that is where the credit opportunities have been kind of unlocked. The kind of payment solutions that India has put in place and the role that the fintechs have played towards that has been, again, marvelous. The fintechs have played another very, very amazing role around KYC and making sure that the marginalized players are brought into mainstream. So therefore, I think the fintechs, one of the data points which I read a short while back, it came out in 2020, was only in the payment space, the investment, not the outcome, the investment alone in payments for fintechs by 2026 is expected to be $1 trillion. So it's and we're not talking about fintech, you're not talking about loans, you're not talking about a KYC, whole host of other kinds of activities in the world of fintech. Therefore, I think it's a space which is transforming the way we manage money across the globe. I am very, very optimistic about this area. But I think we also need to keep track of the fact that the world is constantly changing and the fintechs will also keep changing.
Yeah. As you mentioned that um, change is the kind of constant for banking industry as well. BFSI as a whole, I would say. And with the technological disruption, with the inception of neo banking, digital payments, and digital gold and whatnot available today, what the future holds for India's banking sector as per your experiences in there?
Um, if India is working to achieve the 5 trillion GDP target, then even in the near term, which is what this goal is, things are going to change. It's going to transform. People who are not in the financial sector, I mean, who are getting credit before, are now going to be getting credit. There's going to be more monitoring. The regulations are changing, and we have to be playing a very fine balance between Atmanirbhar and having global connectivity and doing business all around the world. So with that, the potential for growth is massive. And whether it is fintech, uh, pure play banks, or the neo-banking, every one will have a massive role to play. Because in order to achieve those targets, you can't just have one group of people who will be able to unlock that potential. The advantage of fintech is you can do more with less. The resources can be far lesser. It can unlock spaces which earlier was not very practical. the value of traditional banking and insurance sector is it can make sure that the regulatory requirements that we as need in the financial sector to make sure there is no money laundering, or we are able to make sure that it doesn't increase beyond a certain level. We are able to kind of keep tabs of fraud and the ordinary person is not impacted negatively. All that is taken care of. And neobanks make things happen far more easily, and we can leapfrog into ways of doing things that we hadn't thought about in the traditional sector. So I think everyone has a role to play, and it is more opportunity, more opportunity, more opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. And as you mentioned about regulations, we were just discussing before this discussion began about impact of SEBI and other regulatory bodies on the banking sector or the insurance sector. So would you just share some thoughts around that?
I think if you look at, I'm just going to talk about three groups of regulators. One is, like I said, is looking at the capital markets. Reserve Bank is looking at the banking sector or the non-banking financial institutions. And IRDA looks at the insurance sector. They may all have something called KYC of the individual or the institution. While significantly they cover the same kind of things, but because they address different challenges, they probably have differences as well. And India is one of the first countries to put in place a kind of a utility for KYC, at least in the banking sector and in the mutual fund sector. So I think we are ahead of the curve in a lot of things, but the complexity will remain for some time to come, is my opinion. But having said that, those are problems to solve. They're not insurmountable. I think an area that we need to keep in mind is with the sheer volume of information that's coming through, our ability to manage it. And that's where the field of quantum computing is taking on such a major role. And I think definitely the financial sector will be one of the earliest to adopt it. Because we have no choice with the volume of data and the kind of cybersecurity that we need to have in place.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And Sandhya, coming to the end of discussion, I would like to ask you, is there any question you think I should have asked you? What is it? And please answer that as well.
Noopur, thank you. That's a very sweet question. I think there are two stakeholders who will be impacted with all the kind of changes that we are seeing. One group is the customer, which is you will have people who love the kind of transformation that's happening, especially the younger people or people who are very tech savvy, doesn't matter about the age. They are very happy with all the change and they will be embracing the change as it moves forward. Then you have the next group. You have about 150 million senior citizens who may understand what happens, but they are not physically very comfortable with the digital world and they struggle. And I think that's going to be a short-term problem till we arrive at more practical solutions, but it is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. But there will also be solutions that we hadn't thought about. And how we adopt and go with that is going to be interesting. So a customer is one group. The other stakeholder, which is actually the people who are listening to this video, is as professionals, are we ready for the change? We may be wonderful in the, let's say, as agile professionals or risk professionals or whichever other domain that we are working with. The reality is that is going to change. And what was there a few years ago is not going to be there a few years from now. I remember in 2013, when talking about cybersecurity, I remember a lot of the mainstream risk managers would tell me, yeah, but that's not really something that we need to be thinking about. Today, it's a boardroom discussion. We have no choice. It's not just a boardroom discussion, it's also a discussion that you and I would have, because I need to make sure that my phone is not hacked or my data is not hacked. So a topic which barely 7-8 years ago was something which is left to the specialists becomes mainstream. So therefore, professionals in our fields or any field need to be alive to what is happening in the world around, and how do they remain relevant and continue to add value. That's going to be very important.
Certainly, being relevant is very important, and I think I'm really inspired in talking to you about different aspects of it, learning about your journey into financial services and banking industry, and the kind of challenges you have faced and addressed, and impact of fintechs on the financial industry. So it's been amazing, Sandhya, to have you for this interview, and looking forward to some amazing work from you in future as well.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this session as well.